It's not like funny or anything. This is kind of interesting. I think this is gonna be interesting. Which is, gonna make for a nice palate cleanser because because I saw this, it was the 11 rules of Highlander and why there can be only one. Now, I fucking love Highlander. Okay, Wraith, have a good night.
Oh, I finally got the Berserk Golden Arc series on DVD. Cheer 100.
Nice. Very nice. But yeah, like I've talked about this before. Like I love the Highlander franchise. It had some misfires in it, namely Highlander 2 and the last one. But I do love this series. The idea of it is pretty cool. So I didn't know there were 11 rules for Highlander. So I'm like, I'm actually very interested to find out what these rules are because like I've seen all the movies, including that last shitty sci-fi movie. And I've seen the TV series, but I did not watch Raven. I did not watch the Amanda spinoff. Okay. So, for those of you that do not know what Highlander is a movie / television series about immortals. Immortals are basically they are normal people.
Ember, you are the only one, right, chat?
It's basically it's about people that are immortal. They cannot die. They do not age. Like the first time they get unalived, they essentially reborn. They're reborn as immortals. They come back to life and they are immortals. And they cannot die. They cannot age. They cannot die unless you take their head, i.e., the head as Sean Connery put it, if your head comes away from your neck, it's over. And basically they engage in sword fights throughout the ages, starting from medieval times all the way to modern day. What made it really interesting is not so much that you've got these guys running around hiding swords under trench coats or anything like that, but the stories. Like, these are immortals that have lived hundreds or even thousands of years, and they have so many stories that are a part of their history. That's what the TV series capitalized on, is every episode, it was basically, there was the main plot line, but it would reference a story that happened in Duncan MacLeod, the main character. It would reference a story that happened earlier in his life, even if that earlier story was like 100, 200, 300 years ago. So it's just the collective of interesting stories that the way you could tell the story was just really cool, and it made for really interesting characters. And that's why I always loved the Highlander franchise, even though they had a couple missteps to it. So, but I didn't know there were 11 rules. So I'm very curious about what the 11 rules are. Let's go.
Welcome back to Giant Freakin Robot. Highlander is undeniably one of the coolest fantasy franchises ever. Created by writer Gregory Wyden, the franchise is more than just an excuse to have guys running around New York City fighting with swords.
Yep.
When he created the first Highlander movie, Wyden developed a complex and interesting mythology. That mythology grew and expanded as more movies were released, but it really solidified during the course of the underrated and highly popular spin-off television show, Highlander the series.
And this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is where that's what I was saying. They took the concept of being able to have a plot for each episode, but part of that plot is derived from an event that happened in Duncan MacLeod's past. And they were able to tell really unique stories using it.
It's the rules around the world of Highlander that make it interesting. At its core, Highlander is about beings called immortals, who secretly live among us and battle each other for an ultimate prize. But to get that prize, those immortals must follow a set of rules and traditions that guide their actions. Some of the franchise's rules are less set in stone than others. A few were even thought up and then discarded later when it didn't make sense. And the less said about Highlander 2, the better.
Yes.
We're going to pretty much ignore
Yes.
everything that happened in that movie for the purposes of this video.
Oh, thank you, God. Okay, but you know what? Highlander 2 might have been a dogshit movie, but he was fucking great in it. Michael Ironside was fucking great in it. He was amming it up like no one's business.
What we're interested in are the franchise's most consistent and important rules. There can be only one immortal, but there's more than one rule to their universe. Rule number 1.
There can be only one.
Every immortal knows this rule instinctively. The last immortal standing will be all-powerful and gain access to a prize.
I'm gonna actually disagree with that. Every immortal does not know it instinctively. Connor actually had to get taught that rule by Ramirez in the first movie. Who is Shang Tsung's actor, Tysell? McLeod? No, that's Christopher Lambert. Yeah, it's like the rules I don't think are instinctual. Because as I said, he had to get taught that rule by his mentor Ramirez. So, I don't know.
What that prize is
Yes,
a
okay,
little more
yes,
vague.
you're thinking Raiden. I love
In most
hentai.
tellings, the prize enables
I'm not ashamed of it. I love hentai. Really, TJ, you didn't like the TV series? See, I thought the TV series was where it really hit its stride in storytelling. I love the movies, but the TV show was able to capitalize on the types of stories that the Highlander franchise lent itself to.
the winner to become all-knowing and, at the same time, makes them mortal.
I know what people are thinking all over the world.
Whether the prize is worth having or not, there is no staying out of the fight. When immortals encounter each other, they don't have to fight right away. Some immortals become friends and team up. Some develop romantic relationships which last for centuries.
Yes.
But even
I'm pausing a lot. Sorry. I have to say, I did love the chemistry between Duncan and Amanda. The two of them had... Oh, yes, it absolutely had a series, Albert. It had, I think it was like a 5 or 6 season series, plus a spin-off with Amanda, this character right here, which didn't do so great. But I absolutely love the chemistry between these two. Whenever they paired up in the show, it was great. They worked. The two actors worked off of one another so great, and they had both a friendly, comedic, and romantic chemistry that I thought worked really, really well. And yes, Elizabeth Grayson was gorgeous back in the day. It's no surprise that Duncan would fall in love with Amanda. She's absolutely gorgeous, but she's also very quick-witted.
those friends and lovers know that the day may come when they're forced to battle each other.
There can be only one.
Hybrid monster.
Immortals are born just like anyone else. They grow up.
Yeah, LD? We don't talk about the Source film. We don't talk about that monstrosity.
They grow old. Immortals only become immortal when they're killed for the first time. They awaken from their first death totally healed.
What's the matter, Dougal?
You, talking and breathing. And last night all but a corpse.
At that moment, their aging stops, and their appearance is frozen in time. There are immortals who look like children. A few are elderly. Most immortals end up dying for the first time in the prime of their life, and that's no accident. Though the future immortal doesn't know of his own potential.
The Source is the last Highlander movie that came out, It wasn't actually made by a movie studio. It was made by the Sci-Fi Network, and it was not good. It was a very poor way to end the Highlander franchise. To say it was not received well is an understatement. It's probably hated about as much as the Highlander 2 movie. Yeah, it was a sci-fi movie. It was, you can't even call it original. Yes, the one where Duncan broke his sword. Well, Duncan didn't break his sword. He threw his sword at another immortal, and that immortal broke it. Yeah.
Other immortals can tell when someone has the potential power to live forever. They make it a point to make sure such a person dies at the right time, if they encounter them, in the hopes of gaining a powerful ally. While this is not always universally enforced, veteran immortals typically leave newbies alone long enough to get training from a seasoned warrior.
How do you fight such a savage?
With heart,
Good.
faith, steel.
And steel.
In the end, there can be only one.
Finish it, Highlander.
There can be only one.
Immortals can only be permanently killed through decapitation. Aside from decapitation, immortals are immune to everything. Sort of.
Yeah.
Immortals can be injured enough that they enter a state which appears to be death, but they are soon resurrected and totally healed. If they are...
One exception. There is a notable exception. There was, actually two. Let me rephrase. There's two. One was the Kurgan, because in the first Highlander movie, Ramirez, and this can be explained because the neck is a vulnerable part of an immortal.
Sean Connery has to be one of my top 5 actors. His work in Dragonheart was peak cinema.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, they made Draco. They literally modeled Draco after Sean Connery's face. That was one of the earliest versions of basically using computer-generated modeling off of a person's face to make a digital model in movie. Effectively, it's kind of like a coma. And there's two notable exceptions. One was when Ramirez cut the Kurgan's neck, and it never healed. The Kurgan had a vicious scar, and his voice never healed after their fight. Now, that could be explained by the fact that the neck is a vulnerable part of an immortal. And so it kind of does make sense that that would not heal. Another notable part is if an immortal loses a limb, it does not grow back. So if an immortal loses a limb, and they get, killed, but not losing their head, and then they basically regenerate, or come back, they don't regain that limb. So, in point of note, during the TV series, one of the bad guys was, I forget the gentleman's name, but he was the lead singer for Fine Young Cannibals, played an immortal, got his hand cut off, I think by MacLeod, and it did not go back, and he ended up having, a hook on it for the remainder of his time in the show. So it's also, if they lose a limb, the limb doesn't reconstitute.
Not injured badly enough to die,
Correct.
immortals heal from their wounds quickly.
Kinda, sorta, Robo.
He was arguing.
Anyone can kill an immortal, but there's only one way to do it. You must chop off his head.
Yeah.
That's why you
Tornado
don't
they
see
can.
immortals battling each other with guns or flaming arrows. To properly kill an immortal, you need to chop off his head, and the best device ever made for severing heads is a sword. For that reason, nearly every immortal carries a sword at all times.
I don't know if this could be considered a rule. The quickening is not a rule. K-Dog, that was actually brought up in the series. Someone actually did do that. that was actually something that an immortal did do. So why more didn't? I don't know. But it was done. But yeah, as far as like the quickening goes, this is not exactly a rule. It's an effect. Okay, Red Monster, have a good night. Well, this is like the 11 rules of Highlander. So that's why I'm pausing it right at the beginning and kind of calling it out a little bit, because it's not a rule. Like, a rule is things that Highlander that the immortals have to follow. There can be only one. You have to, you have to remove someone's head from their neck to win. Yeah, yeah. I remember that one, Hefe. Yes, Tornado,
that dies,
that
powerful
would work.
energies are released from his body. If another immortal is nearby, they automatically absorb this energy and it makes them more powerful. The process of absorbing a dead immortal's energy is called the quickening, and it's not pleasant.
No, that was number 2,
It's worth
King.
the pain, though, since the more immortals you kill, the more powerful you are. That increased power usually manifests in different ways and is rarely a drastic change. It could be slightly increased speed and agility, faster healing power, or some other less common ability. The more powerful the immortal you kill is, the more power you gain in the quickening.
You must learn to conceal your special gift and harness your power until the time of the gathering.
Yeah, Vishrock, the one you're thinking of that episode, it was actually, the immortal in question was mentally disabled.
Sean Connery was also voted Sexiest Man of the Year 5 times.
Oh, yeah. And he was. Yeah, Vishrock, the episode you're thinking of, the immortal in question, was actually mentally retarded. Like, medically speaking, he was mentally retarded. And he had, like, some kid that was taking care of him. Thank you, Asapat, as he senpai. And yeah, and it wasn't Duncan. It wasn't Duncan that he didn't want to fight. It was Richie. Richie had befriended him and the boy that was taking care of him. I've got to check Tangia. Something's going on with Tangia. I've got to check it. Something went sideways with it. Okay, Tysel, have a good night. But yeah, it wasn't Duncan. It was Richie. And yes, it was the immortal in question who was mentally retarded. Like, Richie was going to take his head because he couldn't defend himself. And it was better that Richie take his head and basically absorb his quickening versus a bad person doing it. And he basically put his head on some train tracks and had a train basically do it, so Richie did not have to physically do the beheading. Yeah, but that's the one you're thinking of.
What gathering?
When only a few of us are left, we will feel an irresistible pull
Yes, Aki.
towards a faraway land to fight for the prize.
Immortals are instinctively drawn to each other. When it gets down to the last remaining few immortals, that instinct becomes so strong it is irresistible. Those remaining few immortals will be drawn together in one place for a final battle to see who will be the one. That time is called the Gathering, and it's one that immortals look towards with both fear and anticipation.
I'm guessing probably not. Well, second? It depends. It depends on if said action would cause the head to come away from the neck, which is not a guarantee in that kind of situation. Holy ground. Yes.
Immortals are not allowed to fight each other on holy ground. More than a tradition, it's a rule enforced by an unknown otherworldly power. When immortals do fight on holy ground, the results are often disastrous. The Highlander television show tells us of a legend that two immortals battling on holy ground led to the destruction of Pompeii.
But two guys.
I have a question. What if two immortals bred and had a child? Cheer 100. How insane would that be?
DJ, I can answer that for you. They can't. All immortals, male and female, are sterile. They are born sterile even before they become immortals. Even when they are, before they experience their first death and then are reborn as immortals, they cannot conceive. They are sterile from birth. And yeah, it probably is going to be covered.
Going at it in a temple in Italy.
It hasn't been covered yet.
It was in Pompeii, 79 AD.
The volcano.
As a result,
I would say
immortals
so,
less
Eki.
interested in fighting often hide for
The TV show typically had mostly male immortals. That is true. Canonically, I don't believe that male immortals outnumbered female immortals. I don't believe. In Highlander 3, his child is adopted. Now, there's some fuckery going on because at the end of Highlander 1, when he gets the prize, he supposedly can grow old and have children like a normal person. But in Highlander 3, they kind of did away. In Highlander 3, they kind of pulled some fuckery, and he had an adopted child, not as actual child. No, he did not have a child in the first movie. He did not. If you're thinking of the flashback during World War II with Duncan, he finds Rachel, who is his secretary, finds her as a little girl hiding when the Germans are bombing, and he rescues her. But he doesn't actually have a child. No, the Kurgan did not kill his wife and child. The Kurgan SA'd his wife, but he did not have a child. That's the key. Yeah, and yeah, Gore, Gore, I try to forget that sci-fi movie. Yes, his wife did die of old age, and she never had a child. And yes, the prize at the end of that sci-fi movie Abomination was that him and another immortal got to have a child. And correct. Heather never told him what Kurgan did to her after he killed Ramirez.
Centuries on holy ground as a way to stay safe and stay out of the battle for supremacy.
When we first met, you felt ill, remember?
Immortals can sense when another immortal is nearby. It's a lot like Spider-Man's Spidey sense. They usually call this sense the buzz, and it often manifests in physical symptoms like stomach pains.
I am not.
Perhaps not as much of a rule as a tradition, immortals rarely
And I was just about to say that. Where immortals are supposed to only engage in one-on-one combat, they did away with that in Highlander Endgame. The Highlander Endgame movie, there's a scene where Duncan deliberately, specifically says that when he gets attacked by a team of it's like 4 or 5 immortals, he actually says, "So what? It's a team sport now?" And the other immortal, one of the other immortals replies, "It's a whole different ball game." By the way, Highlander Endgame, Donnie Yen was in that. And him and Adrian Paul actually fought in Highlander Endgame. It's pretty fucking cool.
gang up on each other and stick to fighting one-on-one. They can work together and go on missions together, but when it comes down to actual duels, those tend to be mano a mano. That means 2 weaker immortals can't team up to defeat a powerful immortal. And it also means that becoming a powerful immortal won't result in a lot of other immortals ganging up on you. In some cases,
I wonder if he's going to bring up Endgame, because Endgame deliberately just took that rule and threw it in the garbage when all those guys teamed up to fight Duncan.
Immortal allies have been known to sacrifice their lives to an immortal friend in order to give them the energy they need to face off against a more powerful adversary.
because you were born different.
No, he didn't bring it up. Yeah, the one-on-one fight, they blatantly did away with that in Endgame. Kind of surprised he didn't bring that up. And what he was referencing, where one immortal sacrifices their life so another immortal can gain more power to defeat a stronger foe, again, that was Endgame. That was where we saw the exit of Connor McCloud. Is Connor fought Duncan and basically fought to the fought in the two got into a position that Connor deliberately set up so Duncan would have the advantage in the fight and could take Connor's head. And Duncan realized it and was like, no, not like this. Don't do this. Don't do this. And Connor said, you have to do it. It's the only way to win. And basically gave his life to Duncan so he could defeat the big bad of Highlander Endgame. Connor basically gave Duncan his power.
Men will fear you, try to drive you away, like the people of your village.
The immortals are forbidden from openly fighting or even discussing their affairs where non-immortals may witness them. Presumably, this is for their own protection. If mortals knew of their existence, they would no doubt eventually find themselves hunted.
He's in league with Lucifer.
This rule is not strictly enforced. Immortals have been known to confide in mortal friends who they trust. If those mortal friends ran around telling others, though...
And, I gotta backtrack. One of those rules from earlier where an immortal can sense another immortal, that was that, he actually glossed over pretty quickly. This also applies to immortals who have not yet become immortal. So this character right here, kind of blocking him, this is Richie. He was one of the main cast in the Highlander series. Richie came into... Okay, Rose, have a good night. Richie came into the series as a normal human. He actually tried to steal something from Duncan's antiquity shop and got caught. And then, as part of his, punishment, he had to work for Duncan or something like that, and he ended up sticking around and became one of Duncan's closest friends during the series. But halfway through the show, the franchise of the show, Richie died. Him and Duncan's then girlfriend, Tessa, got killed by a mugger. Richie then woke back up, because Richie was an immortal. And when that happened, Richie looked at Duncan and he said, "Did you know?" And Duncan nodded. Duncan knew that Richie was an immortal before he became immortal. He knew so that's something that kind of got glossed over, is immortals know when other immortals who have not yet gone through their first death are immortals. Whereas the non-immortals don't. With one exception of, they did actually say that they did in the first Highlander movie, because they talked about when Connor first fought the Kurgan, he had not yet become immortal. But he felt like something painful in his gut or something. But that's the only time they mentioned it, where an immortal can sense another immortal before their first death. In the TV series, that they never brought that up, is the immortals that have not yet gone through the first death don't sense other immortals. But immortals who have can sense it, effectively speaking. Yeah, well, Dwayne, Duncan knew that if Richie experienced a violent death before dying of old age, he would become immortal. He knew he was an immortal. Now, if an immortal just dies of old age, they die. But if they die a violent death, then they become immortal. No, DJ, he didn't have a child. He didn't have a child. He had a wife, Heather. And he had, I think it was his wife when he was in his village, but they never had a child.
No doubt they would be hunted by immortals and killed themselves.
No, you cannot have a family. We cannot have children.
Here we go.
Immortals cannot have children. They are sterile from birth. It's probably for the best. If you live for centuries and have children, your children will eventually outage you and die, while you'll keep right on going. Not a problem for immortals.
I cannot swim, you Spanish people.
See, I think he had a wife in his village before he experienced his first death, but he did not have a child. And with his wife, Heather, they also did not have a child. So yeah, they can adopt. They can certainly adopt children, certainly, but they can't have children of their own. Well, he barely glossed over it because it's very simple. They are born sterile from birth. They can never have children. That was actually a point that was made in the TV series where a woman came to Richie with a child and claimed the child was Richie's. And that's where they explored it. Like, can an immortal have a child before he becomes an immortal? And the answer was no. Immortals are sterile from birth.
I'm not Spanish, I'm Egyptian.
You said you were from Spain.
Get out!
No!
Hey.
Help! Help! Help!
What happens if an immortal gets dropped in the middle of the ocean? Given what you know of the premise so far, you might think they'd end up drowning and resurrecting in some sort of endless loop. Highlander solved that problem from jump by giving immortals the ability to breathe underwater.
Albert. Yes. That's why people didn't like the sci-fi series. I always thought this. It was like, way back when I was watching the series, I felt the exact same thing. That the prize is a myth. I think the prize was always a myth because new immortals are always being born. And so the whole idea of a prize is it was something, it was a myth, or it was just like a carrot that could never be achieved. Because just when you've killed the last immortal, a new one is being born. No, the series did not become pointless. The point of the series is it was telling interesting stories. You could make the argument that the game was pointless. You absolutely could make that point. But the series was good because of the way it could tell stories. Actually, the only immortal that could quote-unquote breathe underwater was Khan in the first movie. I do not believe. I actually think that for a long time, during the series, I think they actually brought up an immortal that I can't remember if it was water or being buried alive. I forget which was, but it was an immortal that got into a situation where they were constantly regenerating and then instantly dying because of the situation over and over and over again for a long time, and it drove them insane. So I'm pretty sure that the first movie is the only one, and it's probably because it was just, it was made back in the 80s, and so they did it for reasons, because they probably did it in the first movie because the visual looked cool. Of Connor underwater, not dying, and, realizing I can't die, and it made for a cool visual. But that's the only time out of the entire franchise where an immortal could be underwater like that and breathe. They didn't do it anywhere else.
It's a little used ability. After all, this isn't Aquaman, but it's been a consistent rule of their existence from the first movie.
No, it hasn't.
And it avoids the thorny issue of water as a potential Achilles heel.
Let yourself feel the static.
Everything
there
else.
There are other minor rules and abilities which aren't always consistent across the franchise. For instance, in the original 1986 Highlander movie, Connor MacLeod is shown to have the ability to commune with animals and control them with his mind. That ability is basically never mentioned.
Wrong. Wrong. So he cannot control the animal with his mind. He was able to basically feel what amounts to the life force of the stag. Because that's what Ramirez was saying. It's like, feel the stag, feel its heart beating, feel the blood coursing through its veins, and it was basically giving him a rush. He was not controlling the animal. That is a fallacy. Now, there was an immortal in the series that could kind of control dogs. They did do that in the series, but I equate that to being, it was a sci-fi-ish series. They had to throw in an interesting bad guy of the week, and this guy could control dogs. No other immortal was capable of doing that. It was unique. So this is not like immortals can control animals. They can sense their life force, which again is not actually something that they did outside. That's something they never did outside of this scene. Again, it just made for a cool scene in the movie. That's it. That's why they did it. Is it made for a cool scene and it sounded really cool and it was never touched on again.
Mentioned again, and that's probably for the best.
You.
The rules we've given you are the rules that matter most, and the ones that you should expect the franchise to adhere to as it moves forward.
We are brothers!
And it is moving forward. Henry Cavill is working on a reboot of the original 1986 movie right now. In the meantime, if you haven't dipped into the world of Highlander yet, we suggest skipping the movies and starting with the 1992 series. Highlander, the series, ran for 6 seasons and managed to eclipse the movies in the minds of most fans. And remember, in the end, there can be only one.
May it be Duncan MacLeod, the Highlander.
Sorry, Connor.
Okay, I don't want to get nuked for copyright on that. So I think that's going to be the end of it. I imagine that music will get me nuked. I know, I love the song too. I love Princess of the Universe as a song. I don't want to get my channel. I don't want to get copyright nuked when I try and post this. But what was I gonna say? Okay, so DJ, they can't. They can't. That's the point. Immortals are sterile. However, the prize at the end of the horrible sci-fi movie was that they could. Now, immortal, they were not immortal, so.
Great, another series for Henry Cavill to abandon when Hollywood writers get involved.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was gonna say. I would not hold out too much hope for that, because yeah, it's yeah, the way Henry Cavill has been getting fucked over lately is like he's been trying to bring about all of these cool franchises to like TV or to movie. And every single one, he's getting fucked over at every turn. And yeah, it's like Henry Cavill did not abandon them. The writers and the studios behind them abandoned Henry Cavill. Henry Cavill's going into this going, look, we need to respect the franchise that we are building this from. He is simply just demanding that the studios respect the legacy that they are looking to build up on. And the studios are basically going, fuck you, we're going to do what we want. And they're throwing in a whole bunch of bullshit into it. And Henry Cavill is going, fuck this, I'm out. And more power to him. I 100% respect him for doing that. Absolutely, I do. He, that's why he left the Warhammer project. It's why I do not have any hope for the Highlander project. And like, he's getting shit up.
Studios respecting the fans and source material challenge level impossible.
Yeah. Unfortunately so. It's so I don't have much hope for a Highlander film, which is fine. I'm still comforted by the fact that the majority of the movies and the TV series were great. their legacy of really interesting stories and fun stories and great stories is still there. There are Highlander novels, Revan. But I don't think the Highlanders have any conclusion. The Highlanders basically are sort of like, in between the series. So they're just like they just tell more of the stories. That's all. They tell more of those stories.